Hey, it's Paige DeSorbo from Giggly Squad. High quality fashion without the price tag. Say hello to Quince. I'm snagging high-end essentials like cozy cashmere sweaters, sleek leather jackets, fine jewelry, and so much more. With Quince being 50 to 80% less than similar brands. And they partner with factories that prioritize safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing. I love that. Luxury quality within reach. Go to quince.com/style to get free shipping and 365-day returns on your next order. Quince.com/style.
Temp check. What kind of summer are we having this year? A family road trip summer? A beach bum summer? Or a wake me up when the sun sets summer? With Instacart, choose your own adventure and skip the shopping side quests. Where available, you can get ice cream delivered to your hotel, sunscreen to the pool, or cold brew to your bed, well, door, in as fast as 30 minutes. Wherever you find yourself this summer, you can get the goods. Download Instacart for free delivery on your first 3 orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum $10 per order. Excludes restaurants. Additional terms and fees apply.
Hello, you are listening to Just Films and That. This is the podcast where we talk about films we think might be underrated or underseen. I'm the host, Josh Hallam, and I'm joined this week not by Alice, not even by Jamie, by another brilliant co-host slash guest. I'm joined by Em. You might know as Em from Verbal Diorama. Em, thank you very much for coming on. How are you? Thanks for coming on.
Hello, Josh. Hello, listeners. It's so delightful to be back.
Again,
I'm sorry that I'm like the lackluster replacement for Alice and Jamie. You were like scraping the bottom of the barrel for podcasters.
You're much better than both of them, honestly. Honestly, they're not fit to shine your mic. That's what I think.
No, not at
and
all.
Neither of them listen. So,
I mean, it's hard to get people to listen to your podcast these days. And if your co-hosts start willing to listen, I mean, Jesus.
Yeah, and if every chance you get, you slag them off, they're never going to listen, are they? But no, how are you? This is your second appearance.
Yeah. I'm like I say, everything is great. I'm super busy, but I will always make time to help out wonderful podcasts. And you needed a co-host.
Indeed.
I was like, I'm gonna stand up and be counted.
Stand up to be counted. Yeah. Indeed. So this week's film is Galaxy Quest from 1999. So if you've not seen that, spoiler warnings, or you have had 25 years. Em, now you picked this one. So tell the guys at home a little bit about what it's about if they don't already know. But more importantly, why did you pick it?
Well, I mean, I picked it because it's great and it's super, super underrated. Like, I feel like not a lot of people talk about Galaxy Quest. But just to kind of give a bit of a rundown on Galaxy Quest. So Galaxy Quest is, in this universe, an old TV show. It's a sci-fi adventure series that takes place aboard the intergalactic spaceship, the NSCA Protector. And 18 years after the show is cancelled, the actors basically go to their version of Comic-Con, but a lot of the actors are basically kind of getting a bit bored with going to these Comic-Con events. It's not called Comic-Con in the movie. I can't remember what it's called in the movie, but it's like Comic-Con.
That sort of thing, innit? Yeah.
Yeah, so they basically make regular appearances in costume. They have to say the lines, and as professional actors, they're getting a bit bored with saying the lines and basically getting overshadowed by the lead character, Jason Nesmith, who's basically played by Tim Allen.
He is.
And then they actually encounter some real aliens who have been watching their show. They think it's a historical document, and they basically base their lives off the show Galaxy Quest, and now need the crew of the NSCA Protector's help to defeat this genocidal warlord. And so they go off an adventure in space, and it's wonderful and it's very funny.
Indeed. So we think it's underrated then. That's the main reason.
Yes.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, and then the other reason, so one of the reasons, a little bit background for the guys at home into how this came about, the episode, not the film, is that you were on another podcast who is a mutual friend of ours, Pav. You were on Top 10 of Anything doing 90s comedies. And you put this in that. You put this in top 90s comedies. And I thought, well, that's on my list. So it was on my list of podcast films to do, and I thought, well, who better to do it with than Em? And here we are talking about it then. So that's sort of how this came about, because I believe Pav is hopefully going to come on at some point and talk about a film that he picked, which I'll save for nearer the time. But anyway, let's get stuck into it then. So, having watched it again for the pod, what do you like about Galaxy Quest apart from everything?
I mean, I really do love everything about this movie. I mean, it's got a really interesting history about this movie. It started out as a script called Captain Starshine. It had Harold Ramis involved at one point. It had Stan Winston Studios and ILM involved. Kevin Kline was going to play Jason Nesmith. He declined. Bruce Willis was going to be in this movie. Tim Robbins, Mel Gibson. Basically, who's who of actors was basically asked to be in this movie. And it was basically Tim Allen who really wanted this role. Obviously, he was quite big in the late 90s with like Home Improvement and obviously starring in Toy Story. He ended up meeting with Harold Ramis. Harold Ramis wanted an action star to be a comedian and not a comedian to be an action star. Then Harold Ramis left the production. But basically, fundamentally, the reason why we got Galaxy Quest and the reason why we got the movie that it is because the studio weren't paying attention to what was going on in Galaxy Quest because Gladiator was being made at the same time.
Oh, right.
And so it's basically one of those movies that kind of slipped through the studio system that no one really paid attention to until it came out. And, you know, it's got an incredible cast.
It does have a good cast.
Such an incredible cast. And, I mean, you can't really go wrong with Sigourney Weaver and the late, great Alan Rickman.
Great Alan Rickman, of course.
I will die on the hill that I genuinely believe that this is his greatest performance. Honestly, I'm being deadly serious. I love him in this movie because he encompasses the character of Alexander Dane, you know, this Shakespearean British actor who's like, you know, treaded the boards and he's a professional, darling, you know.
Yeah.
And now he's reduced, in quotes, to saying these lines and he hates it. And then he gets an amazing arc through this movie. And then when he says the line at the end, it's so wonderful and heartfelt because he genuinely means that this character will be avenged. And I just love it. I love it because it's a movie about fandom, but it doesn't ridicule fandom. It doesn't talk down to fan culture. It embraces fan culture. And additionally, and I don't think we talk about this enough, it's the fans who actually save the day. Because it's the fans who know the ship inside out to actually get these characters. I mean, I love the scene with all of the smashy, you know, the smashy bits. And Sigourney Weaver's character is like, well, she says the line. And in the movie, it's screw that, but we know she doesn't say screw. And like, she's like, why would they put this in an episode? This is ridiculous. It's like, I love the attention to detail and the ridiculousness of sci-fi TV. And it's just, this is a love letter to sci-fi TV, to fan conventions, to sci-fi fans. And no one talks about Galaxy Quest. Why?
No, and I think it's funny because no one talks about it enough. And I think since it came out, it has become like a bit of a cult. It's definitely got a following, but it hasn't got a mainstream following. It's one of those films where lots of people don't seem to have seen it, but those who have seen it have loads of love for it. It's almost like, it's funny because it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy because it's a film about fandom and the film itself created a specific fandom. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It's not very often that you get that, but this is one of them. And I think that's what you said there is really spot on, which is there's a lot of films that came out around this time, but more specifically after, that would do things like mock fandom, or they would try and do pastiche, or they try and do not satire or parody. So, and I've mentioned this on the podcast before. So if you look at some films, so for example, right, obviously the pinnacle of a parody film, pinnacle of a film like this, not necessarily like Galaxy Quest, would be something like Airplane. or Naked Gun. And those films have then influenced things like Scary Movie. Now, I don't mind the first Scary Movie or the second one, but then as when you started to get into Date Movie and Epic Movie and Disaster Movie, all the Dragon, not the Dragon one, the 300 one, the Vampires one, all those ones, it just became... What you were doing is basically going to the audience. Oh, do you remember this? This came out recently. And you were like, what's the joke? It would just be like, look, Willy Wonka. Yeah? And what? Well, there he is. What's the joke?
It's like they rely too much on like pop culture.
Exactly. And you can't just show it. You've got to actually make a joke.
Yeah. And that's why those movies don't age very well, because it's like, oh, okay, you're lambasting Twilight. Well, that came out in 2007. Like, why are you still talking about Twilight and sparkly vampires? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Whereas the fan culture here, I mean, obviously, it's no secret that this is kind of based on Star Trek.
Yes.
Let's be honest. It's very obviously a loving homage to Star Trek. And I think that definitely helps the movie. Because obviously, if you're a Star Trek, that's different. That's,
if you're a Star Trek fan.
Yeah. If you're a Star Trek fan, I mean, any Star Trek fan that I've spoken to loves this movie.
Yes. Yeah. And so do some of the actors, I believe.
Yeah. And I feel like because Star Trek has been so embedded in pop culture for decades now. If this movie had come along and completely ridiculed that environment and took the piss, and just, I feel like if the Star Trek fans turn against it, you've lost it. You've completely lost it. But there was, in 2013, I believe there was a Star Trek con, and this is considered, and I believe still to this day, still considered a canon Star Trek movie.
Right, because it's so close.
Rated in the top 13 Star Trek films as of that time. It was number 7. So they consider this canon, the vast majority of Star Trek fans. And I feel like that speaks to the love and the level of detail and quality that went into this movie, that it doesn't dumb down for the audience, and it doesn't, beat down its audience. It's really, really respectful. And to be honest, I think that's why it endures, and that's why those, Date Movie and Spartan, whatever it's called, Spartan Movie or whatever, that's why they don't.
No, I think you're right. I think the difference is, and I think so for me, I think this is possibly the perfect pastiche, parody, whatever you want to call it, film. It is a parody, but it's so close to the original that it's almost not. It's almost something else. And the way I see it as a love letter, like you say, as a pastiche, and it is namely of Star Trek, but because of the nature of Star Trek in terms of how influential Star Trek was on sci-fi in general, whether that be TV films, Battlestar Galactica, Star Wars, all these things, it's unavoidable. But Star Trek is the main thing that it's sort of not even. It's not even sending up, it's a love letter to, isn't it? So it gets it so perfect. And I think it's down to a few things. So like you said, first and foremost, it's a love letter to the series. It's not only a love letter to the series of Star Trek, it is a love letter to fandom and how people love things. And it's really easy to take something as other films have done and point a finger at it and say it's a bit weird that someone loves something this much. Well, it's not. You like what you like. As long as it's all above board and no one's getting hurt, then you can like what you like, and that's that. But second of all, one of the things I think this film does really well is it does it with 100% sincerity and earnestness. So one of the things they always say, and I don't always agree with this, but a lot of critics say things like a good comedy shouldn't look like it was fun to make. Because if you're just, and I've been in productions, I've been in comedy and stuff like that, where you're all having a laugh and you all think you're really funny, and you put it to an audience and they just go, you're not as funny as you think you are.
Yeah.
And that's so easy to do. It's so easy to convince yourself that because you're in comedy and writing and all that whatever we put out, people will think it's good, right? But what they did with this is they made it entirely earnest. So much so that what appears tongue in cheek is actually almost points a carbon copy. Do you know what I mean? So all the cliches, the music, the sets, the language they use, the way that the show appears to be written, the little cliches they throw in there, like the fact that Sigourney Weaver's character just repeats the computer, or the line that Alan Rickman says, by Grabthar's hammer, and all that sort of stuff. The whole point that Sam Rockwell is in it as a cast member, but the whole thing with red shirts in Star Trek was that if you went down to a planet and it was 4 of the main characters and one other guy, the other guy was the guy who's just going to get killed first, or just the one that was going to get killed. And they do it so well that I think the real success of this film is that you would know that it was a Star Trek aside, whatever you want to call it, pastiche, if you've never seen Star Trek. Now, I've never particularly seen Star Trek. I've seen some of the films. I've seen the odd clip. There are episodes of the TV series and things that are so ingrained in pop culture that they are unavoidable. And things like that. I have friends who are into it who love this film. So I think that's the real success of the film, is that by doing it so sincerely and so close to the original source, that you make it so it's just almost a celebration.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It is a celebration. It is a completely heartfelt celebration of fandom. And also, I'm not the biggest Star Trek fan. You know,
No.
I've watched a few episodes. It was on TV when I was a kid. So it's
Same,
I'll watch The Next Generation. You know, that tended to be the one that I went for because it was the one that was on TV at the time. I always enjoyed Star Trek, but I feel like this is the sort of movie, like you say, you can pick up. You could be the biggest Star Trek fan in the universe, or you could be a complete noob to Star Trek, and you would still get enjoyment out of this movie. You'd still understand the references in this movie. You don't need to be a huge fan of Star Trek. But I think, kind of going back to your point of comedy, I think, like you say, when comedians kind of believe their own hype, and kind of believe that they're like the funniest comedian in the world, that's kind of when they lose the audience.
Exactly.
And like you say, because the actors in this movie, they are funny actors. I mean, Tim Allen in his heyday was a very funny actor. I think he's a bit problematic nowadays. I don't really remember.
Yeah, I think so. Buzz Lightyear's roles got smaller and smaller as the Toy Stories have gone on.
Yeah. Well, they had to make way for Keanu Reeves in the fourth one, didn't they? So, it's, you know, he was a big name comedian in his day. But then, you know, Alan Rickman's not particularly known for his comedy, but he is a deft comedian. You know, he can just, and he's so dry, you know, he's a typical dry, witty kind of comedy. And it works really well because Sigourney Weaver's not particularly known for her comedy. And she's really funny in this movie, and the way she delivers her lines. And I just feel like if this had been like, say, for example, the whole cast was from SNL, which could have happened, you know.
Indeed, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
It wouldn't work because you wouldn't feel that authenticity of these genuine actors, you know, spouting these genuine lines and being like genuinely, oh my God, I've got to say the line again, you know, oh Jesus, you know, what has my life come to? I feel like it wouldn't work. It wouldn't have that sincerity. And I think you kind of touched on it when you're like, it's a genuine love letter. Like the intent behind this movie is so sincere and genuine and heartfelt. And you feel it through literally every single scene. And I really wish that more people knew about this movie.
Yeah,
because
same.
we were talking just before we went live. Live? You know what I mean. You know what I mean.
Yeah.
Before you hit record.
Indeed.
But, you know, we were talking about the availability of movies on streaming. And this movie is not currently, to my knowledge, available on streaming here in the UK, but it was once upon a time. And, you know, the movies like this come on and off streaming pretty regularly. But it just feels like no one really appreciates this movie as a genuinely great comedy. Partially maybe because of the year it came out, because as we discussed before we went quote-unquote live, 1999 was a stenner year for movies. So
it was.
Maybe it was
arguably the best, yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
It's aged, so there's, you know, it's mad, isn't it? Because you look at 1999, so this, and I believe Mystery Men came out in the same year. And I think they have both aged really, really well. It's almost like pop culture has caught up with them. Obviously, more specifically with Mystery Men because of the amount of superhero films there are now. But with this as well, it feels like it's really sort of chased its own tail in a good way. But no, you're right. It's so well cast. Like you say, you've got Tim Allen who can do heroic, but also a bit of a rogue, a bit like a bit of a scumbag in some ways. Alan Rickman's amazing, obviously mainly known for villainous roles and stuff like that, but also did this and Dogma in the same year, which I think is incredible.
Love Dogma.
Yeah.
Love that.
Sigourney Weaver, who plays the sort of that whole idea of there's one female character and they play up and she only does one thing sort of thing. But the other side of it is Sigourney Weaver's so famous for other sci-fi roles that she's almost sending herself up in that way. So, she is, if you say to most people, I'd argue every film fan, stronger, name one female sci-fi hero, bang, it's probably going to be Ripley.
Absolutely.
Maybe like a Princess Leia, but probably Ripley. Then you've got like Sam Rockwell, Tony Shalhoub's great in this. The guys, Rainn Wilson's in this. It's his first film. Justin Long, I think's in this. And stuff like that. So it's really, really well cast. Not only so outside of the pastiche thing as well, I think it's just funny. So even if the pastiche thing was 10% worse than it is, it's still funny. So for example, I still laugh every time that Alan Rickman is never not in the makeup. So at one point he's on the phone in either a hotel room or his house or his apartment, whatever he's in, and he's still got the makeup on. And I laugh every time because of that. The bit with the aliens on the rock planet where you think they're just cute little babies and then they all eat one of them.
Yeah,
I laugh at that every time. I think it is so funny. It's got that great thing as well where towards the end, like you say, there's some real great emotional beats in this in terms of the aliens not knowing that it's not real and what comes from that. So overall, I do think it's great. It's just it's aged so well. It had been a few years since I've watched this, and I enjoyed it just as much as the last couple of times I've watched it. And it's almost ages. I think, everything ages eventually, but I think you could still watch this in 50 years.
Absolutely. And the thing is, CG in the late 90s probably was a bit ropey, let's be honest. And there are some CG characters, like you say, the little aliens are clearly CG and the big rock monster is CG. But I think it's handled fairly effectively and respectfully. It's not particularly overused.
No.
And what I really love is Ceres and, his alien goons and his creatures. That's all practical. And you can tell it's practical, it's tangible. It's a guy obviously wearing an animatronic mask, but it still looks great. The slimy face kind of thing that he's got going on. And he's a very menacing character, but I think he's menacing because you believe that he is a real character, because he is a real character. And, he is a really despicable character. Like, he is legitimately, torturing the Thermians.
Yeah.
And this is basically a genocide of this race. Like, he is all out completely put the Thermian race in extinction for no reason other than they are Thermians. We're not going to go all political, but, there's a lot of stuff happening in the world right now that's very similar to, what this character is doing. And, it's incredibly kind of emotional. I get an incredibly emotional response to that because it's literally, there's no reason other than the fact that it's one race who are superior or seemingly superior and this other race that they deem inferior. And the Thermians are desperate and they're like, well, we know who we can help, who we can get. We can get the crew that's on these historical documents. Like, it makes total sense. Like, these people have been going all over the universe, like fighting monsters and saving people and, they can help us. And the Thermians are wonderful characters. The idea that they're actually like these tentacled alien creatures, also practical, which is great. And that they have like a human form and they then talk like this. And it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah,
and
it's brilliant. It's like you say, it's that way that they've learned to talk like the cast.
Yeah, based on the historical
Yeah.
documents. But that's what makes great comedy is you don't want a comedy that's just firing joke after joke after joke after joke. That's not going to work. You need actual kind of emotion. You need a reason for doing this. And I feel like this movie really excels because there is genuine emotion. There is a real emotional connection. As soon as you meet the Thermians, you just kind of fall in love with them with their little weird walking movements. Like they walk a bit like puppets.
Yeah.
That was all kind of, I think that was all improvised as well. Like it was like, how are they going to walk? Oh, let's walk like this, And it just kind of, that's how they created these characters. And have you seen the Never Give Up, Never Surrender documentary?
No. I came across it when I was looking for a copy of the film. But no, I think I might watch it now though. Have you seen it?
It's excellent.
Is it really good? Is it
one of the best documentaries I've ever seen? And again, the love that the people that made this movie have for this world, the world of Star Trek, the world of sci-fi conventions, the fandom, like it's so apparent in this documentary. If anyone who's listening loves Galaxy Quest, I would wholeheartedly recommend the documentary as well, because it's just, like you say, I think we've said it so many times now, it's just a love letter. It's a love letter to the movie, which is a love letter about fandom culture, a positive fandom culture, because there can be a lot of toxic fandom out there.
No.
Maybe for other franchises more than Star Trek. But, I kind of feel like the Star Trek fandom, there's very little toxicity in there anyway.
It's probably one of the better ones, especially when it comes to equality and stuff like that, because it's always been a progressive show.
Yeah, no, but that's the thing. Like, I think people forget how progressive Star Trek actually was back in the day. How responsible it is for making things on screen. For being the pioneer of
pushing the boundaries and stuff, wasn't it? It was
absolutely. The idea of like a white man kissing a black woman, that was.
Yeah.
I mean, like nowadays, that's normal. That's absolutely normal. But it's like, back in like the 60s, I think it was in the 60s or maybe the 70s, I can't remember. But that Star Trek pioneered the idea of a white man kissing a black woman on national TV.
I think it is the first interracial kiss on television, isn't it?
I believe so. Yeah.
Which is, that's scarily not that long ago.
I know. We've come a long way, but not long enough, if you know what I mean.
We'll move on to talking about things that, if we can bring ourselves to do it, that we didn't like about Galaxy Quest. Now, we always try and be balanced, but obviously you're the guest. So did you find anything that you didn't like, or is it just knockout, funny, love letter to fandom?
I mean, I really struggle to find fault with this movie because let me try and be like really, really objective about it. I mean, like I say, you could maybe criticize some of the dodgy CG, but I feel like that kind of adds to the charm a little bit.
I think so. I think so.
The effects in Star Trek, they were basically like men in suits most of the time. Like, I feel like it would have been quite funny to like have like some like random alien, like clearly some dude in a suit. But I
can see the zipper on the back and a coffee cup on the side and all that sort of stuff.
I feel like that would take away from its like loving, respectful kind of tone. I mean, I'm just trying to think. I feel like in the convention hall itself, there are clearly some extras that don't really know where they are, because you kind of feel like these are like the people that you're wanting to see. Like, imagine going to Comic-Con and going to like Hall H, and you've got like the entirety of the MCU cast in front of you, and you've got like some guy in the background going, and I felt like maybe the hall would be a bit more kind of animated, but like the the ones at the front are really animated, but the ones at the back are a bit like,
especially because
are we going to get paid?
It is so expensive to get into those things. You would go crazy. Like it's like if you've ever watched, I don't know if you're into football or not, but if you've ever, obviously when international tournaments roll around, lots of people get into football who aren't really into football, and that's great. Hopefully the country comes together in some respects, sometimes too much, and then you stick a flare at your ass and you're on the front cover of a newspaper like the last time we got to a final. But anyway, every now and then you might watch like an England game with people who don't know what's going on. So you you get people getting into it, and then there's people usually at the back going, "Come on, England," like that. That's a little bit what it's like. Is that Harry Kane? Oh, and it's a little bit like that. Like you say, people at the back like, "Come on, mate. I know you're being paid a day rate, but you got it. Like these are like your gods that are on stage."
Yeah.
So that's it then for me. Just a bit of dodgy CGI and a little bit of shit extra work. I'm
just really struggling to think of anything else that I don't like, because I feel like every joke in this movie lands. And like you say, just the little things like the fact that Alan Rickman had to sit there in the makeup chair every day, and you can genuinely feel his ire at like, oh my God, I've got to put this makeup. Oh Jesus Christ, I've got to do the night. Oh my God, and he's so good.
He's great.
I know, still, like I say, I will die on the hill. Alan Rickman is great in everything, but he is outstanding in this movie just because he's being Alan Rickman. Like it's and like I just feel like every emotional beat lands, every joke lands. I'm really struggling.
No, that's okay. That's
really
okay. Like I think you've been fair. I think you've been balanced. There isn't, like, from my own point of view, there isn't really anything. I was the same as you. Like, I have a lot of affection for this film. I think it's really, really well done. It's really tight as well. It's like an hour 40, something like that. So the one thing I noticed is there's the odd plot convenience, and I don't mean, there are some things that happen that are part of the pastiche. So the fact that, you know, Tim Allen gets left on the planet and ends up with his shirt off and all that sort of stuff, that's fine. But there's the odd thing that outside of the pastiche, outside of the love letter, I'd never noticed before. The one that really stuck out to me was that the Thermians don't know that they're from a TV show and don't know what TV is, but the villain does.
Yeah, actually,
so when he goes, they're from a TV show, the villain's just sort of like, he just knows what it is, which implies that these big lizard crab people either know what TV is or have TV, but the Thermians don't. So I noticed that because he had to laugh and because he had to be like, I'm the villain, he got what he was saying. But that's really, really scraping the barrel for something I didn't like. Like, it doesn't really matter, does it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's. I'm making excuses for the movie now to try and go. Actually, no, it's great. But I think, in my mind, the Thermians, but you remember when Saras is like torturing Mathazar, and he basically says to Tim Allen's character, you know, explain like these historical documents, like explain it as if you were explaining it to a child.
That's true, actually, yeah.
So maybe because I mean the Thermians, they, bless them, they don't come across as the most intellectually advanced race.
Well, no, so maybe it's just that then, yeah.
So, and obviously, like, Saras is maybe a bit more clued up. Like, I don't know. I don't want to be the person going, well, actually, Saras is really, really intelligent. Because, you know, he's a genocidal warlord. So let's not vouch for him.
I think it probably is. I think you've hit the nail on the head, though, is that he just knows and they don't, and that's it.
Yeah.
He can just grasp it better than they can.
But, you know, that just kind of makes you love the Thermians even more because, you know, it's like, if they are genuinely like, you know, childlike, innocent creatures, you know, who don't know the difference between right and wrong, you know, that sort of, well, clearly they do because, you know, they know that what Saras is doing is wrong. But that makes Saras even worse because he's a genocidal warlord. He's killing all these Thermians who are literally like children. Like, they're so innocent that they don't understand the difference. So that kind of makes him even more of a dick. You know?
Even more of a dick.
Yeah.
Let's look at the scores then. So, at the time of recording on IMDb, and I'm quite surprised at this, it gets 7.4 out of 10. Over on Rotten Tomatoes, the audience give it 79%, and in a rare event, the critics give it 90%. So the critics are pretty keen on it.
Yeah.
So that averages out to, let me just work it out. Hang on, 70. Man works this out. 81. So 81%, or just over 8 out of 10. In terms of the score. So what do we think then, Em? Is that reasonable? Is it overrated? Is it underrated? I don't think it's overrated, but I think it might be just underrated for me. What about you?
Absolutely, it's underrated. I think it just summarizes everything that we've said so far on this episode. This movie is seriously underrated. Like, I'm not suggesting that this is like a 10 out of 10 movie. It's maybe like a good 9.5 out of 10. I think I rated it 5 out of 5 on Letterboxd, but it's not like a 4.5 out of 5. It's more leaning towards a 5. But yeah, this movie is severely underrated, I would say.
I'd agree. I think it's very much underrated. If you haven't already seen it, if you're a fan of sci-fi, then do check it out. Em, thank you so much for coming on. Tell the guys at home a little bit about where they can find you. What have you got going on at the moment? Lots, I imagine.
Gosh, lots. Well, first of all, Josh, thank you so much for having me. It's been, as always, an absolute joy to come and chat to you.
Thank you.
We chatted for a little bit beforehand, before we went live, as I mistakenly said earlier. I'm still going to run with that. But yeah, it's always wonderful to chat to you. And obviously, I mean, I love chatting about this movie, but it's always good to kind of chat to good people about good movies, you know? So thank you for having me back.
Thank you.
Yeah, if people want to know where they can find me, obviously, I've done a little bit of film history on this episode. I have a film history podcast. So Verbal Diorama is basically all about the history and legacy of movies you know and movies you don't. I almost forgot my own tagline then. That's crazy. But I've only been doing this for 5 years.
Have you?
So
yeah.
No, I've hardly done any episodes.
Still waiting to see how it goes.
Yeah, I might give up after 5 years. But yeah, I am a film history podcast, so I love talking all about film history, about how stuff was made. I am obsessed with it in a weird way, but in a good way. And yeah, at the minute I am kind of doing like double episodes, so I'm basically giving myself even more work to do because I'm a sadist and I love to work on this podcast. But yeah, there's over 250 episodes out there. There is a very old episode on Galaxy Quest, actually. Right. It's very old. I think it was from 2020. So it's basically one of the first maybe 50 or so episodes that I did. I can't remember the number, actually. That was a bit stupid of me. I should say the number. But yeah, it's an older episode. So the quality's probably not as good as recent episodes. But I adore this movie, and I am more than happy to go on any podcast and talk about this movie because it's great. And as we are constantly saying, this movie is ridiculously underrated. And if anyone listens to this and goes, actually, I've not seen Galaxy Quest, even though I've been spoiled by this episode a little bit, I want to go out and watch it. Please go out and watch this movie because there is something for everyone. And yeah, I kind of feel like I don't understand how anyone would dislike this movie. So I'm curious as to like the rotten reviews, what people didn't like about this movie. Because to me, this movie, like I say, it's not perfect, but there's so much good stuff. Like, unless you hate joy.
That case could be made for some people on the internet not liking joy.
That's true. I mean, this is the internet, isn't it? Let's be honest. There are always going to be people who hate joy on the internet. But this movie is just full of joy and should be enjoyed and loved by more people than it is. So
Indeed.
Yeah.
So in terms of Verbal Diorama, then wherever you get your podcasts,
I was supposed to do that, wasn't I?
Yeah.
Yeah, basically, Verbal Diorama, wherever you find your podcast, wherever you find Just Films and That, you'll find Verbal Diorama.
Indeed. Quite often side by side, fighting the fight. We'll put links to all that in the episode description and Em's social media. Give her a follow. Do listen to her episodes because it's a little bit. I've said it to you private, but I'll say it to you publicly. Mad respect for everything you do with the podcast. You do it all on your own. It's a fantastic quality podcast. It's a great idea, and it's a bit of something different as well. I don't think there's many people out there or any other people out there doing something like you and as good as you do it. So definitely check it out. Give it a listen. It's well worth your time if you're into your film history. We touch on a little bit here, but we're not a film history podcast, are we? So if that's what you're into, heading over to Em's. It'll be in the episode description. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you for being so kind. It's really appreciated. And thank you again so much for having me. And hopefully I can be back soon again in the near future.
So there we go, and there, another guest episode in the bag. Thank you very much for Em for coming on and talking to little old me about Galaxy Quest. As I said in the episode, if you check out the links below, you'll be able to check out Em's stuff. It really is great, so give her a listen, give her your support, and I will put some stuff out on social media as well. We'll be back next week with another episode. In the meantime, get in touch with us at filmsandthatpod@gmail.com. We're on all the social medias. If you just search for Just Films and That, and you'll find us, and we'll see you next week. Goodbye from me. Cheerio!
Even when we're on a budget, we still deserve nice things. Quince is a place to scoop up stunning high-end goods for 50 to 80% less than similar brands. They have buttery soft cashmere sweaters starting at $50, luxurious Italian leather bags, and so much more. Plus, Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing. Get the high-end goods you'll love without the high price tag with Quince. Go to quince.com/style for free shipping and 365-day returns.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
From BBC Radio 4, Britain's biggest paranormal podcast is going on a road trip.
I thought in that moment, oh my God, we've summoned something from this board.
This is Uncanny USA.
He says, somebody's in the house, and I screamed.
Listen to Uncanny USA wherever you get your BBC podcasts, if you dare.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.